This is the story of a man who had to start over in his 40s, with nothing, no savings, no financial plan, and a life that had quietly collapsed underneath him. Just a few years earlier, everything looked different. A steady career, a comfortable lifestyle, the kind of life that makes people assume you're doing just fine. But behind that life was a truth he didn't understand yet. He hadn't built wealth, he had built a lifestyle. And when that lifestyle finally collapsed, he was forced to learn the financial lessons most people don't discover until it's too late. The surprising part of this story isn't that he lost everything, it's what happened next. Because starting over in his 40s forced him to learn something about money that changed the entire direction of his life. A lesson about wealth, discipline, and financial maturity. The kind of lesson many people only discover after decades of mistakes. And the truth is, his story didn't begin in his 40s. It began much earlier. Back when money first arrived. Back when life still felt simple. Back in his 20s. So let's listen to the journey and the lesson he discovered after losing everything.
If you had looked at my life back then, you probably would have thought I was doing pretty well. I had a good job. I had a decent place to live. I wasn't struggling. But if I'm being honest, I never really understood how money worked. I thought if I just kept working, kept earning, things would eventually fall into place. And for a long time, it felt like they were.
Until one day, he realized something that terrified him. The career looked stable. The lifestyle looked comfortable. But the financial foundation underneath it didn't exist. And the lesson he was about to learn is the one most people discover far too late. Like most people, his financial story didn't begin with failure. It began with opportunity. His 20s were the first time he had real money coming in. A paycheck, independence, the feeling that life was finally starting. But what most people aren't taught at that age is how easily income can turn into lifestyle.
I remember getting my first real job. It felt like everything had opened up. I could afford things I couldn't before. Nights out with friends, trips, a nicer car than I probably needed. And honestly, it didn't feel irresponsible. It just felt like I was finally enjoying the money I worked for.
And that's exactly how lifestyle inflation begins. Not through reckless decisions, but through small upgrades that feel normal, reasonable, even deserved. The problem is, very few people are building financial structure in their 20s. They're building consumption habits.
Looking back now, I never once thought about saving seriously. Retirement felt a lifetime away. Emergencies felt unlikely. I assumed the future version of me would just figure it out.
And for many people, that assumption quietly shapes the next 20 years. The 30s are when life begins to feel more established. Careers grow, income increases, responsibilities expand. On the surface, everything appears to be moving forward. But this is also the decade where financial illusions quietly take shape.
By the time I hit my 30s, things were going pretty well. I was earning more money than I ever had before. I upgraded my apartment, bought a better car, and honestly, it felt like I was doing exactly what I was supposed to be doing. Work hard, make more money, improve your life.
And that's exactly how lifestyle inflation begins to disguise itself as progress. Every raise becomes a new expense, a better home, a better car, better everything. Nothing feels reckless. In fact, it feels normal.
I wasn't thinking about financial independence. I wasn't thinking about margin or long-term stability. I was thinking about keeping up with the life I thought I was building. And the truth is, I never once asked myself a simple question. Was I building wealth or just building a more expensive life?
And that question is where the illusion begins to crack. By the time most people reach their 40s, they believe their financial life is already set. The career is established. The lifestyle is familiar. The future seems predictable. But for many people, this is the decade when the illusion finally breaks.
I remember the exact moment things started to unravel. It wasn't dramatic at first, just a few financial pressures showing up at the same time. Expenses were higher than I realized. Debt balances were larger than I thought, and the margin I assumed I had wasn't there.
Financial fragility rarely reveals itself during easy years. It reveals itself when life becomes unpredictable. A job change, a divorce, unexpected expenses. The kinds of events that quietly test the strength of your financial foundation.
That's when I finally saw the truth. I had spent 20 years increasing my lifestyle, but I had never actually built financial stability. My income had grown, but my discipline hadn't. And when everything finally collapsed, I realized something that hit me harder than losing the money. I was starting over in my 40s, with nothing.
And that moment, as painful as it felt, was the beginning of a completely different way of thinking about money. Starting over in your 40s forces a kind of honesty most people never experience earlier in life. The illusions are gone. The financial shortcuts don't exist anymore. And for the first time, every decision begins to matter.
Losing everything forced me to slow down. I had to look at my life differently. The first thing I realized was how much of my identity had been tied to the lifestyle I thought I needed. The nicer car, the bigger apartment, the idea that success had to look a certain way. When all of that disappeared, something surprising happened. Life actually became simpler.
And simplicity is often where financial clarity begins. Instead of trying to rebuild the same life he had before, he began rebuilding something stronger: structure.
I started doing things I had never taken seriously before. I tracked every dollar. I built a real emergency fund. I learned how debt actually worked, and for the first time in my life, I started living below my income, not because I had to, but because I finally understood why it mattered.
What he was building now wasn't a lifestyle, it was a foundation. Financial recovery rarely happens in dramatic moments. It happens quietly, through small decisions repeated consistently over time. And once structure replaces chaos, something surprising begins to happen. Progress returns.
The first year wasn't exciting. It was mostly about stability, paying off small debts, building savings, learning how to manage money without stress. For the first time in my life, money stopped disappearing. I finally understood where it was going.
And that clarity changes everything. Because once someone learns how money actually behaves, discipline begins to compound.
After a couple years, things started to look different. I had savings for the first time. Real savings, not just a few $100s sitting in a checking account. And eventually, I started investing, slowly, consistently, nothing flashy, just systems that worked.
What he was building now wasn't fast wealth, it was durable wealth, the kind built through patience, structure, and understanding. Most people believe financial maturity comes from success, but the truth is, it usually comes from failure. Not the kind of failure people talk about publicly, the quiet kind, the kind that forces you to question everything you believed about money.
Looking back now, losing everything in my 40s wasn't the end of my financial life. It was the moment I finally understood it. For 20 years, I thought making more money was the solution. I thought the next raise, the next opportunity, the next step in my career would fix everything. But what I really needed to learn had nothing to do with income. It had everything to do with discipline. I learned that wealth isn't built during the easy years. It's built the moment you stop pretending the system is working and start building one that actually does. Starting over in my 40s felt terrifying at the time, but now I see it differently. It forced me to become financially mature, and that's something I should have learned decades earlier.
Many people spend their 20s chasing opportunity, their 30s expanding lifestyle, and their 40s confronting reality. But the people who eventually build real wealth all discover the same thing. Income doesn't create stability. Discipline does. And sometimes the most powerful financial advantage a person can have is the wisdom that only arrives after starting over.